Welcome to the third half blueprint before the kickoff. I'm Scott Hamilton. So it's the week of the Six Nations. Now, this isn't a Six Nations preview, and it's definitely not about predictions. Well, we might get into predictions a wee bit, I suppose. It's a third half conversation, a moment to look back briefly, and then talk about what really matters before the noise start. Today we've got Scotland and England in the room. Yay! Two rugby cultures with long memories, strong opinions, and very different recollections, I expect, of the same matches.
Yeah. Well, we played in the Five Nations, so there you go.
We're playing an age card here already. So I'm joined by
black and white then as well.
I'm joined by Bryan Redpath, 60 cap Scotland scrum half and former Test captain, and Andy Gomersall, 35 cap England scrum half, Six Nations regular and World Cup winner. Between them, decades of elite tournament rugby and a rivalry that's always been bigger than the individuals wearing the shirts. Ba-boom. So we're going to touch on last year a bit, but this is really about people, leadership, and how innovation is changing the game before the first whistle blows. Bryan, Andy, good morning. How are you both?
Morning, very good, very good. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Dave Gomms, you're looking well, pal. So it's been a while since we've caught up, so it's just nice to catch up this morning and hopefully see you again soon.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you actually remember, before we start, do you remember playing against each other? Do you have a moment in mind where you played? And when I invited you on to do this, because you were both on the third half separately last year, and I said, I'm going to get them on together. And I think my wife said, did they like each other? Did they have a real kind of bottom of a ruck moment?
I have vivid memories of Gommers playing for Wasps, as probably more so than anything because of that Wasps team. And Gommers doesn't know this. I used to massively respect his passing ability, his ability that he had through obviously playing with Kenny Logan in Scotland and try to pick his brains about what was Gommers like, what's he this as a person. And Gommers was obviously so different from Doss, who was a different character. But I remember the Wasps days, and I was like, geez, he's a decent player, isn't he, this fella? He can pass well, he kicks well, he's not as gobby as the other lot. You know what I mean? So it was actually
Redpath. Time out, Redpath. What's this about being nice? Like, come on, we're going to get a bit of rivalry.
All right. That doesn't mean I was nice or I wasn't feisty.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a lot of respect for Andy. Very good player. He was just playing in an era with Bracken and Doss, which is always tough, like myself with Nicol and Armstrong. It is difficult, and there was different qualities about each other. But yeah, I've great memories, and as I say, some of them are probably more in a Wasp jersey when I was at Sale and stuff. But fond memories definitely.
And also just with the Wasps connection with Damien Cronin, Andy, they're legends, Lions legends, Scotland legends, and you learn so much. So I would come up to Kenny's farm, in Stirling, and just you appreciated early on what it meant to play for Scotland, and you sort of had that wee bit of envy, in fact, of how close the guys were, the kind of the positive chip on the shoulder to obviously beat England. So I understood. So you had a massive mutual respect. And it was proved over the years, Scotland got some really big wins over England and vice versa. So it wasn't like it was just this foregone conclusion. England had more players and were better and would win. That wasn't the case. And I learned a lot off watching these guys. And you take, as Brush said, you take little bits of every scrum half in the world. You will take something out of what makes them very, very special and try and emulate it, and it helps your game and makes you better. So I think Brush and I had a healthy banter and relationship, but very, very competitive on the pitch, and that's not the case throughout the game of rugby. There'll be fights and fallouts and goodness knows what else, but we always had that healthy relationship.
Brilliant. So I'm going to come back to this in terms of preparation, because it's really interesting what you both said. Coming at the same topic from a different side. But let's start with a very quick look back at last season. And if we look back now, what kind of, because we're in the week now and it's uppermost in everybody's minds. What really stood out for you from last season, and in particular, what do you think it tells you about preparation, which we've touched on here, and also the pressure that players and teams are under now, and leadership as well. Gommers, do you want to kick off here?
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm a big football fan as well. I watch the football, and I just think the intensity of the pressure is far greater. The scrutiny, it's everywhere, right? And it's social media now as well. I remember Eddie Jones playing up in Scotland, and there was the fracas afterwards. It's just media everywhere, and you can't leave it. Brush and I used to be able to leave it behind. It was the Sunday papers if we played on a Saturday, and that was it, right? You were waiting till maybe Friday team run before you did the press again. It is just intrusive beyond belief. But I think therefore they are, just incredibly well prepared. The detail has been done already for the Six Nations. And I think you're just seeing players. You forget how young some of these players are, right? And they're thrust in. When Brush and I played against one another, I was literally rabbit in the headlights, running around, had no idea what I was doing. And now they have to have all this preparation, and they have to go in mentally very, very strong. But they're still young and they're still learning, right? So they're going to make mistakes. So it depends on the coach. I think Greg has been incredible over his period of leadership, and they're forever changing their coaching staff. So just keeping it fresh. And England have gone through a lot, right? But they've kept Steve Borthwick at the helm, which has proved right. But I think it's ridiculously competitive now. You see Italy, they're always going to pull off, a couple of wins now, which wasn't the case previously. So there's no real easy game, right? And normally in a Six Nations now, you have 3 away, 2 at home kind of scenario. And so this year for England, it's 3 away and 2 at home. So it's going to be really tricky for them. But it's hugely competitive, right? From the coaching staff to the players to everything now.
And do you think, Bryan, that's changed a little bit? And it's interesting, Andy, you haven't quite said it, but, maybe a little bit more relaxed about the home games compared to the away games, depending on the cycle and stuff like that. But Bryan, to Andy's point about every game is harder and more competitive now, do you think that impacts the prep, that you're no longer thinking, oh, that one's a banker or that one's going to be slightly easier, let's focus on that one?
Yeah, massively. And I think as Andy mentioned, back in, the earlier days in the 90s and early 2000s, this year as a Scottish mentality wise, this year was the years that you would want to focus on. You had Ireland, Italy, Wales away, and you had the two at that time, still is generally the two big teams at home, England and France. And you knew if you got the day right, got the weather right with the French team and the discipline right in the French team, that wind up Danny Grucock and you're going to get a win potentially of both these games. And then you're going away to Wales and Ireland then, who weren't as feared as they are, sort of as the Irish team is now. And Italy then was that kind of banker where you could say, well, we'll get a win, even though I've lost there, on a couple of occasions. But yeah, I think it's that was all looked into, and I think now that as Andy says, there's so much analysis and so much that goes on in the background, and players know each other a lot more. They all play in different clubs now and around Europe, around the world in certain parts, and you know everything about each other. Whereas back in the day, there was times where you didn't necessarily see them as much. You didn't necessarily see it on TV. The analysis wasn't there to analyse every part of his game. Part of his temperament was analysed back, now compared to then. So, look, the next sort of 7-8 weeks is huge for all the players, and the first game up is big for everybody, because that allows you to kick the tournament off, whether that's a home fixture, whether that's an away fixture, whether that's your first time or your 50th time. It's the first game's huge. The first game gets you into the tournament, and you probably get a performance then that'll take you on and set you up for the tournament, and you have to have that mindset. The first game is so important nowadays.
And do you think so interesting and a lot of pressure, right? Everybody's going to start to increasingly feel the pressure this week, and and I know from from working life, from sporting life, from the arts and everything like that, pressure can manifest itself in different ways. You know, does it sharpen performance? You know, does it? Andy, you said you run about like a rabbit in the headlights. But does that pressure evolve with you as the tournament evolves as well? Do you tend to cope with it a bit better and get the counselling to help you channel it better?
Yeah, I think so. It does, you know, depending on the result, as Brush said, you need a fast start, you need a win to give you the confidence, right? And then you can kind of progress on. But every team is calculating how to beat you and how to stop you ultimately. And that's one of the challenges in the game now. There is still a lot of kicking. That is, you know, part of the game. Possession is absolutely key. You can imagine the amount of lineouts that they look at, and you know, back in the day, Scotland would come down to Twickenham, and you know, they'd be videoing their lineouts and then we'd be working out how to stop it. Right? I mean, that is the game. That is the nature of it. And I think this year is going to be difficult for a number of reasons. One is we've just, you know, finished the Lions tour. Some of these guys will be absolutely exhausted still. You know, they come straight back into their club. They've got to play the games. They've got to pick up their form. They don't just get automatically selected. They'll have a plan. Yes, you know, I guess the S&C and the health side of the game is a lot better than in our generation, but it is still, you know, a slog for these guys that have played the Lions, right? So form can dip. So it's a big ask, you know, the last game, especially for these Lions players, they are going to be, you know, really, really struggling. So it's a balance of depth as well. And, you know, and I think where England are currently very, very strong, they've got an insane depth, and they seem to, Borthwick has been, you know, blooding a lot of players, and they've come in and they've delivered. So he's got selection issues, but not only that, if he's got injury or somebody loses form or he wants to tinker with the team, he's got incredible strength in depth. So I think that kind of releases the pressure, and I think the coaching staff, they take a lot of that pressure. They try and protect the players from that.
And can you made a point there actually, which I hadn't really thought about. You talked about after the Lions tour and the fact that they're still knackered. I can't remember. I paraphrase a little bit, but is that emotionally or physically? Do you think they're still coming back from the intensity of it on the head or the body?
Quickly, both, but you know, there's a lot. As I say, the health benefits of. You know, the stuff that they do around recovery is insanely good now. How these guys, I mean, Brush and I, it was pretty brutal in our day, but we didn't do the recovery. We did, but it's nowhere near the recovery that happens now. So how they play at this intensity and all that is insane. So their bodies are definitely broken, but they repair themselves and they recover. It's the mental side. That's really
and also just on that, I'm guessing, you know, when you. I never on the Lions tour, but the boys that did come back from previous Lions tours that would play after the November into Six Nations, they trained with each other for 6-8 weeks. They now have a far better insight emotionally and physically of what that player's like from Ireland, Wales, England. So they now, everyone's got an insight to each other a bit more, and they've carried bumps, and then your club wants to retain that top 4 slot. Your club wants to get into knockout latter stages to get home quarters, home semis. So you see every single cycle after a Lions tour, players struggle. You know, there's a lot of injuries at the moment around the game, and that is because they've had that brutal mental, physical, and which one repairs better, which one looks after itself better. That's all down to the individual, the club, the needs of the nations that are attached to it all. But you can't take one game lightly.
Yeah.
You cannot take it. And you don't want to really as a player either. You can't say, well, actually, I've done an Alliance tour. I don't want to play November. I don't want to play the big games for the club. And, you know, Wasps was a classic example back in the day, finishing outside the top 6 or outside the top 4 or outside the top 2. And suddenly they won the league being in 4th, 5th, 3rd position 2 or 3 occasions. So it is where you finish off and how you can recover and how you can rotate. And it's going to be an intriguing time because I can only say that all the Scottish lads will know a load more emotionally what gets to somebody and what doesn't get to them. And we have to use that as an art of ours to get under the skin of the Irish, the Welsh, well, Morgan's injured, and there's only one really. But it's how do we get under the skin of people? How do we affect them now going into Six Nations that we know playing alongside someone? That wasn't his confident part. Now that was his weakness. How do we use it? How do we find it?
So do you think when they were training together, they were actually thinking ahead and thinking, I really know what irritates the shit out of this person. I'm going to bank that for the future.
I mean, there's a bit of that, but that might be over a pint or something. It wouldn't be during training. They're so focused, and they are bringing themselves together to be an amazing team. But it'd be interesting, picking on Finn Russell. England have tried to get to him. They've tried to pick him out. There's guys been stepping out the line to smash him, and he loves that, right? And then they get him on the floor. It was in the Six Nations contact with the Netflix documentary, and they elbow in the head, and it didn't work, right? Yeah. So those guys, he got better. So those guys will now know maybe something different, how to get to Finn at Murrayfield, right? They may do, I don't know, but that's the experience and getting to know one another, which adds to it, right? We want personality in these games. We want the players to have, and it makes it a better spectacle for us watching.
Yeah, I mean that the Scotland-England game is primarily. Let's go back to the crutch of everything. Back for us was always about Scotland-England. It was always about, my first game was 94, lost late on in the game. 95 was a Grand Slam decider, last game of the tournament. 96 was a Grand Slam decider, last game of the tournament. And, like that back then, it was everything. It was the Braveheart cycle around the mid-90s. And it was everybody, that passion around it. And, many people used to say, as long as you beat England, we're not really bothered about everybody else. Now, us as competitors, me as a former captain was like, we need to be a bit more consistent. We can't just think we can beat England and then it papers over the cracks that going to Cardiff or going to Lansdowne Road as it was and losing was acceptable because we beat England. So you did try as a captain to change that swing to that mindset. But when you've got 60, 70,000 people that are saying, you beat the team in white, then you're all right.
It's not good enough.
That was always the saying, beat the team in white, you're all right. And you could, you can't think like that really if you want to get better for the cycles of World Cups. But don't get me wrong, that was always the game that you wanted to make sure that you were playing and performed well.
But there's no point in finishing second bottom and having beat England. This is my kind of like of the past 5 or 6. We do really well against England, but there's no point in doing that. And then you're fighting for the wooden spoon or not for the wooden spoon at the end of the day.
Yeah, but you're forgetting about the good nights you had out on that as well. Just so you know, I had in 2000 when we lost the Grand Slam up at Murrayfield, I had a great night with Donny Weir, so I was happy. He looked after me.
I want to go back, Andy. You mentioned something there that's interesting about squad depth and something like that. And I was looking at some stats over the weekend, and I think all teams last year, all 6 teams, 5 teams played more than 30 players throughout the tournament. Right, I think Scotland just dipped under. I think they were 29, but everybody else was somewhere between 30 and 32, 33. Now, I'm sure some of that came down to injury, but also just that rotation. So again, coming back to this first week coming into the tournament, how does that pressure kind of get to the players as well, knowing that, listen, you really are playing for your position here and acknowledging that I may be one of the 15 or 18 or 20 on the day that will get rotated out at some point?
It's agonizing, frankly. We always remember, where our training camp was, and it was, we weren't slumming it, put it that way, but Penny Hill Park, you would drive down the driveway, and you'd see your number plate up because it had the recognition on there, and you'd just be petrified. You'd be like so nervous about. You knew that the team was going to be announced and selected. Everyone was nervous. Everyone wanted to start. Everyone wanted to be in the squad. Everyone wanted to play. You didn't want to be that person leaving on a Tuesday, and let the guys go off. You just didn't want that to happen. So what that does is it, adds an enormous pressure, but it's sort of out of your control. The more experienced you get, you've done all your, talking on the pitch, as it were. Before that, you hope that you get the selection. But I think nowadays, that's still there. But I think that they are when you started, you tried to keep your shirt and you tried to win, right? First and foremost, and the coach would never realistically change the team, right? So there was that level of consistency, and you got to know one another. Now that's gone out the window because it's such a big squad, more and more people in the squad, but also the tactics to play different teams. We may see a different 10. We may see a different centre partner, and it's just so commonplace now. So literally, that's really hard to get a level of consistency. That's why I respect these players so much, because they come in and out, and they literally get to a level which is incredible, and they haven't played for 6 weeks or whatever it is. So I think that it's just a different concept. It's just totally changed. It's got, back in our day, Brush and I'd admit we were professional, but it's no way to the professionalism that is today. It's like on, super professional, not what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, Gomarsall, is I know from just obviously having a son involved in it and still being around that when I was coaching for 13 years and in the Prem and stuff, but the level of detail that goes to the off-field and the culture side of it, to say, if you're not willing to buy into the culture and the selection process and the recovery and everything attached to it, you'll probably find yourself out the squad. There's a 15 guys waiting to come into the squad who have that. Now, you've got experience and the knowledge of it. You have to buy into it. We can't have a bad egg, and we you can't have one poor link in the chain, and if that manifests around the group, and you see that in different teams, how it changes people. And the players themselves now are aware of that due to their club rotation. I can only talk of Cameron and Bath and how they rotate their squad to keep players, one, happy, two, the coach sticks to his guns and says, you've got a week off this week, no matter what happens, everyone's fit, you're off. No matter who we're playing, that's your time, and you get yourself right and come back into it ready to go. And that probably puts the pressure back on the player to say, I'm trusting you, here's your chance, here's your week off. When you come back in, I need you ready. I don't have you an excuse for a week off. And that kind of puts it a little bit back on the player's side. But they are so professional. And the social media side you mentioned at the very start, Gommers, was players are thriving on that nowadays. It's given them PR, it's given them boot deals, kit deals. It's changed the whole dynamics. The game still, for us back then, the game was massive. But then the social side with each other was huge. And then now I think that's probably a little bit different, because they move on so quickly to the next day, the next challenge, the next event, the next training session, the next rehab session. We had that chance to bond with each other as a group of players from two different countries. I still see that as a little bit less, and that's a shame. But as you say, the level that goes into it is huge.
And just you touch on it there, Brian, and I know that this is pretty close to home with you because Cam's had his fair share of injuries, yeah. And you kind of don't know what it's going to pop up, and how do they cope with that? Like, obviously the medical teams of that, they're all over you and they want to make sure you're at your peak. But then the more you try to push back to your peak in recovery, I always think the more highly tuned you are, the more susceptible you are to injury again. So surely there's a fine balance here between, I want to get back, I want to get my best players on the pitch. Emotionally, I want to be on the pitch, but I don't want to stress my body even more.
I think the early stages of that process is the hardest part for any player or any young player. The first month, the first 6 weeks, whether that's an AC and you're out for 8 to 9 months, whether that's shoulder surgery or... I think the big part is people surrounding these players, whether that's family, whether it's best mates, whether that's physios, strength and conditioners. They have to have that human element to them. And if the player can relate to it and they can relate to the player, and there's going to be days where he may rock up with a long-term injury and does not want to do that training. He's sore, he's aching, and the picture is you're back in 6 months, you're back in 6 weeks, you're back in 6 days, whatever element that is. Now, your body is just a machine that seems to recover, and the recovery equipment, the surgeries, so much better. So I think it's that human element for me, is just having people around you that keep you on track. And we touched off air, about certain challenges that was around for different people at different times, and that's not changed. The human element of it never changes. It still has to be there. Now, it was maybe harder in our day just because it was, Jim Telfer was very cutthroat with it. You know, you got dropped, you got told wide, go away and sort it. Whereas now they give you go-aways and solutions to sort it. They give the club information to say he needs to improve in this. So that's what we'd like to see him improve. If you can incorporate that within your training week, your playing structure, he's got a better chance to play international rugby. That then benefits your profile as a club and the player. So, I mean, it's a challenge, and injuries are always a challenge, always were a challenge. It'll never change. You know, there'll be injuries, there'll be more. How the player copes with it, how fortunate or lucky they may be, because it's sometimes just an unfortunate incident in the game, and you can do an injury. Look at Dupont last year in the Ireland game when he done his ACL, bang, just like that. You know, so you have to take the rough with the smooth. It smooths itself out, definitely.
Yeah. And listen, both of you are heavily involved in industry and commerce now, right? And I think about leadership a lot, yeah. And the responsibility that leaders carry for the emotional state of their workforce, their employees, you know, and in this case the squad. So, but where does that responsibility have to stop? You know, like you can invest so much time to kind of progress a squad, to put your arm round and everything. But again, to your point, Andy, about squads are so much bigger these days. I know you've got a lot of support and infrastructure around it, but a lot of it will come back to Steve and Gregor and Andy, the various head coaches, to provide that emotional crutch for players as well.
Yeah, I mean, you get a sense of, you know, why was Andy Farrell picked as the Lions coach, you know, and his son is one of the world's best players. It means, you know, he's very good at the emotional side. He's very good at the management side of looking after players and fundamentally telling them the truth, right? And hitting them hard between the chest rather than stabbing them in the back. And that, you know, there's an element there that gets so much respect. And I think down to that, the reason I'm obsessed with culture in sport, in that, why are some teams able to peak at the right time? Why are some teams able to dominate, you know, an era? Why are some teams able to win at the, you know, the highest level? And I do believe it's something bigger and something culturally bigger. You look at South Africa at the moment, number one in the world by a country mile, and everyone is, you know, clambering to be close to them, to play them in a World Cup final. Effectively, that is the game at the moment. And they have something. They have a bigger purpose, which I think, you know, when you look at Rassie Erasmus, I mean, I haven't studied enough and seen enough and watched enough, but he has got an insane appetite for hitting them at the right time and telling them why they aren't, when they think they are performing at the highest level and that they are playing for their families and they're performing brilliantly. He tells them that they're not, and it hits them so hard and makes them think. And so, you know, sport is cruel. Fundamentally, sport is horrific and cruel, and the best team doesn't always win, and the nicest people don't always win, and all that stuff. So hardening, you know, and the culture is, I think, at the top elite level, is the art form. That is the art form.
And somebody, Bryan, you know, you're still coaching at a senior level as well at the moment. I mean, somebody has to look after the kind of mental and emotional state of the coach as well, do you know, like, because this filters up the amount of pressure that these guys are under, you know, Ireland to keep performing, to, you know, go and win a World Cup or at least get to a semi-final, and Gregor to kind of, like, you know, stop, you know, worrying about beating England and beating everybody else. The media pressure on these guys is huge as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing as a coach. And if you're a DOR or the senior coach in that team, you know, I remember even taking over at Gloucester and people like Tim said to me, Brushy, don't change, still be you. And I'm like, yeah, but my life's changed.
Exactly.
Everybody else's perception of me's changed. One, because you're getting more money. They say, well, he's getting paid to do this, so he has to carry all the responsibility. He has to be able to show and deal with that emotion. Winning and losing games creates different emotion with you, you know, in the squad or at home or around your family. And again, that whole culture side of it. You know, Gomarsall talked about South Africa. They've got a nation full of challenges that they've come over the last 40, 50, 60 years. And Rassie Erasmus is a player that wasn't necessarily the first man on the team sheet, but playing against him years and years ago, very good rugby player, very good smart brain, and he incorporates that with that physicality, and then with the emotional of the country. It's like, it's a really powerful tool, and they have got players that will all buy into that, and everyone has the same song sheet. Whereas when you're looking at the UK and you've got these different little pockets, and Scotland's criticism 21 or 24-7 or something up, or 27-5 up against Argentina, and we'll lose the game. They score 30 unanswered points. And why is this after a yellow card? And you didn't kick on to beat New Zealand. And Gregor, you've been in the game too long. You're doing a consultancy thing with Red Bull at Newcastle. And it just, for him, it must be really difficult to not show that emotion to the players, because you want a clear and precise message to the players, but you want them to see that you're coping and you're dealing with it. Because when you struggle, players then take on board a little bit too much of the responsibility, and you still have to lead. Leading is everything, and how you lead in different ways. You lead in words, you lead in actions, you lead in emotion, you lead in just how you enter a room, how you leave the room. And that's something that every modern day coach, you do need mentors in the world. And you do need people that you can look up to and reach out to without that being deemed as a weakness.
So I spend up.
Or isn't a weakness. It's just where and how and when you use it. And Gommers will know it from business, and I'm now realizing it from business. And how do you manage that process? Because we've had to reach out and say, I don't know that. I'm struggling with that. Now that's quite difficult when you've been successful sportsmen. But once you bridge that gap and bridge that emotional side, it's a very powerful one, because you learn really quick.
So I spend a fair bit of time coaching in business, senior leaders, and this is such a big topic for their presence in the room. You know, they come out of one meeting and they've been lambasted, they've lost a deal, there's something going on, and then 5 minutes later they have to walk into a team meeting and lead the team meeting and clear their head and be positive and strong and, you know, close off the last meeting before they go into the next one. And that's how a coach, you know, will feel, or a leader feels across business, sport, or any walk of life. It's a really tough thing to do and to manage. And I think we forget about that at times. You know, we talk about the emotional welfare of players, but coaches and leaders, it's a big deal as well. So I want to kind of final round of questions. We talked about Bryan. It was really interesting. You talked up front about you used to research Andy. You probably sat there with your A4 pad with your VHS videos, you know, running, or it might have been Betamax. You might have been ahead.
No, yeah,
or 8 mil reels.
And it's the same for me. And Andy was the exact same, because his and my, I would say, both of us passed the ball well, so we knew the benefit. So we took away we weren't, I don't believe, selfish players. So we then used it and said, if I get the ball quick to Gregor Townsend, Charlie Hodgson, then I know that our back three at Sale are going to score tries. And then Josh Baxendale's getting the ball quickly, and he doesn't have to do anything, just be a distributor. So you have three of them, myself, Charlie, think about it. It was the same with Scotland, myself and Gregor. But I knew then, how do we stop that happening for Wasps? How does Saki and Lucy, how do we stop them in the game? Stop Gommers. Get Gommers out of the game. Try and get him off his game, try and just rough up that area around the contact area. So it means his pass is delayed, he's off balance. So that was the part of it. How do I tackle him just at the right time so he's not quick to the next ruck? So it's a pick and go from a forward, which means we've got more numbers to close the edges. So that isn't changed. And I know that happened to me. The amount of Leicester used to do, Dan Garforth used to try and hold me down every single game. And I'm thinking, geez, is that all he's in this team to do, is to slow a wee Scottish fella down so that Sale can't play? And it was like, yep. And it was so
stop the small lad and everything will be okay. But stop the small annoying lad and everything will be okay. But do you think so? I can see you, I can visualize you sitting in your front room doing this almost yourself back in the day. I know it wouldn't always be that. But my question was like, that has changed because there's so much data, there's so much technology, there's so much analysis. How do people get fed all that stuff? And Bryan, you talked about rugby IQ before and actually learning the game by watching it and stuff like that. Has that all changed now? Well, listen. Yeah, okay.
It's just at another level. It's in every aspect. Every player's thinking the same way now. So it's not just the key sort of spine of the team. Now it's everyone. 1 to 23. Your job as a sub, this is your job when you come on. If he's on the pitch, that's your job. This is your job. They're going to be doing the exact same to you. If Henry Pollock's on the pitch, can we wind him up? Now that's going to be an intriguing battle for Scotland and England. Cannot wait for someone that's got so much confidence. And I've got to say, take your hat off to someone like Henry Pollock, who doesn't start every week for Northampton, but when he gets on the pitch, he makes a difference. He does something. He deals with it. Bordeaux away when Northampton were playing, stood up to the booing, the physicality. So every player now has a job description. Every player's game's on a single timeline. What do you want to hear? The analysis. There's probably 5 analysis people that are working behind the scenes now that are saying, what do you want? John, what do you need? Gomms, what do you need? Brushy, what do you need? Right, okay, when I got on, I want to need to know this. I want to need to part of the game. What the weather's like after 60 minutes. What's it meant to be like? Right, well, where does it kick off to? What's the kicking strategy? So there is so much analysis. Something that can cloud a player and you're going in pre kind of planned everything. And that's a bit there. Well, if the picture changes, are you good enough to change? And that's a bit where you see a Pollock coming on and playing what he sees, a little grubber kick through or a chip kick or a ball inside. And that's the talent of the player and the person and the coaching staff that don't hold you to a pre-planned play every single time. Now use it, but use the option differently. Use the next option. And that's just skill set and vision.
I think that's why we love the game, Brush, is for you and I, it was a game of chess. It was tactics the whole time. I learned a valuable lesson just evaluating a game every 10 minutes. So you could react and change something. And I would always negotiate with a defensive coach. If I wanted to get to Brush, I would say, you're making me go here, but I think because he does this, I want to be here to get him, right? So I would have to negotiate with our defensive coach to say, let me do something out the line. You'd see Gareth Davis, the Welsh number 10, just fly out the line. And he either makes an incredible tackle or, worse still for the opposition, he intercepts and goes the length of the field for 7 points, right? So that is a total and utter tactic that they've seen from analysis, data, information. One thing I did and we changed with Gloucester was the third defender would have to mark the 10. So we said, if we want to play a wide game, if I can extend my pass and make it longer and faster, what about in fact, they don't even know this, but the 10 is standing on the 4th defender or even the 5th defender. So you're going wide and you've got all these players that are stood there inside, not doing anything, right? You're just running around them. They're just running around going, I can't get into the game. And so we did that, and it took a year for people to work that out, literally a year to work that out.
You go on with Kingy, though. Kingy was classic up there, so actually, it's not about me. Kingy would say, well, it's not about me. If you got hit me there, Gommers, I know I'll just do that there. Fraser Walters was the same. Players that were unsung in these positions, I would say Charlie Hodgson was the same. Gregor was different because Gregor was he was a strong kid, a really good runner. So Gregor was different. Gregor wanted the ball wide, flat to run, not necessarily wide, flat to play like a Charlie Hodgson. So, yeah, look, I mean, I think that's the art of it, isn't it? It's just like, it's a game of chess, and I think that keeps you fresh. It keeps you energized, and it gets you excited every session, knowing that you've done something there that nobody else really can see other than the people within the actual bubble that you're in.
So, Scott, you know, my frustration with business now is, I get frustrated with companies' culture, but also their recruitment. I think what the sportsmen, when they're young, is they don't realise is what you just described is when they're rinsed in front of all their friends and mates, that they play with, they get rinsed they go away and they work on it, and then they come back stronger on the Saturday, which doesn't always happen in business. They're rinsed and they go away and they go and hide for 2 years and deliver nothing and then get sacked, right? So that hiring a sports person is one of the best things. And one of the tragedies is trying to mix the understanding of the athlete and the sports person, knowing what their skill set is and what they're really, really good at to transition into business and be effective, whether it's in operations, in sales, or whatever it is, in leadership. And so I think there's a missing, element there for me, or a wasted opportunity. Because when you've stopped playing rugby, there's a lot talked about transition. It is brutal, absolutely brutal. Brush would have known went straight in, back into managing and coaching into the game and running the club. It is brutal, that transition. And so what we're trying to work on is we've got 20 players already funded through the 03 champions. We've got it funded to help them go and understand, transition is really cool, that you've got some unbelievable skills. And there are companies out there that you don't even know, and they don't even know yet, the recruitment wise, that you are going to be a powerful tool in their business. And so we're just about to fund that for 20 people. I'm so excited about that. And that's just the start, right? That is just the start.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, I read a lot of this stuff, and I think what you're doing is amazing. How can people find out a bit more about that, Andy? Because it is so important. And also, just before you do that, the opposite of that is the chat I've just recorded with Kent Bray, which I know you're both familiar with as well, where the pressures of people when they come out the other side and what Kent went through himself, which we're going to put up this week. But just where can people read more about that work?
Yeah, so our charity partner is Switch to Play. Across all sports, they're transition experts. So we've partnered independently. We're collaborating with the Players Association, as you can imagine, the RFU and others, because we want to independently support, because we know what it's like. We've all been through it, and we've got the power to raise funds to be able to give to help the players transition. So Switch to Play are amazing, and we're just about to deliver it come March. 20 players going through that transition. So look up that charity.
Brilliant, thanks. And listen, very, very quick fire final questions. Go back to the Five Nations. 90 something. I'll leave you to have a think about it. What's the one thing that you'd tell yourself at this point in the week, just as the tournament's about to start? What's the one thing you'd tell yourself to ignore? Bryan, first up.
Ignore? Jeez. Going back then, it would be like, my biggest fears was I just wanted to perform in a big game. I didn't have anything to fear or run away from or anything. It was just, I wanted first set of passes, first tackle, just involvements in the game. I just, couldn't wait for that to happen. And the quicker that happened, everything just chilled down, everything relaxed. And I never went in with the massive fears. It was more of just, let's get that first 5 minutes out of the way, and then let's get stuck into the game. Not necessarily worried about win, lose, draw. It was just get the first 5 minutes in, for me, was the most important thing. Then I would settle.
And Andy, what would you tell a young Andy Gomersall?
I mean, certainly on it's the greatest lesson I give my children is stop giving a monkeys what people think, right? So the press on the Sunday, you read it, and it's amazing to you get 8 out of 10 or something, which never happened. But anyway, you get 8 out of 10 and they're lauding you. It's wonderful to read. When you get 4 out of 10 and your kicking was terrible, you got substituted, is brutal, absolutely brutal. Why waste the energy on it? Like, I just tell myself, stop, don't look at it. Focus on what you can deliver and do. That would be that affected me massively. But when you're young and you're a kid and nobody's kind of advising you and helping you with that, that's a natural thing to do, right? So that would be the obvious one.
And we forget how young these kids are, don't we?
We do. I really do think that. You wouldn't put these guys are on, and I always reflect on this. A CEO of a mid-sized business, right? The rugby player now is paid more than that person. Now, would you allow that 19-year-old, Henry Pollock, right? Would you allow him to come and run your company? No way would that happen, right? Which just shows you where they're at. It's just crazy, right?
Yeah.
No, 100%. Example there, but you know what
Yeah, same.
Would you let Andy Gomersall come and run your company?
Totally not.
Back then or now, I don't know. On that note, guys, listen, that feels like a great place to stop. We've talked a lot about, the pressure, the calls, the leadership, team sheets. Thank you so much for the honesty and the reflection. I think it's been a really lovely conversation, and we've not got into predictions or forecasts or tried to be the rugby pod. I'm not Jim Hamilton, I'm Scott Hamilton, and that's been the third half blueprint before the kickoff. Great to talk to you both, and enjoy the rest of your day and week, and enjoy the tournament.
Real pleasure. Thanks, Scott. Great to see you.
Guys. Gomarsall, great to see you, my friend. Take care of yourself. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.